think sandboxes are cool and all of that, but to make a real game, you're supposed to have mountains, right? I use this incredible plugin called Godot to produce the terrain and add grass to it. How does it work? Well, it just uses images as a data structure, where each pixel has an associated color which is the height of the map at the particular point. That makes it very convenient with a graphical interface to add and build functionality like colors and grass on top of it. For example, first we can add just some mountains to it. Let's put more opacity there. So the opacity here in the grass is translated to the height of the terrain that is applying, and after that it is just adding another image to work with. After that we can just use this to make it green, for example. And now we can put grass on top of it, which you can see is moving because it has a wind effect shader built in the plugin, and it's awesome. And there you have the terrain, which I built using this incredible plugin that we have to thank Zealand for putting it into the Godot community. When I think about the AI of the goblins, their speeds and their attack patterns, I try to ask myself, how does it fit with the game mechanic? Does this or that feature break boring patterns on the behavior of the players? How can I force the players to use different approaches to combat the goblins? One thing that I noticed when playtesting is that one can run backwards, pulling and pushing the objects in the environment until the goblins are dead. I would prefer to enforce the player to go and pick the rocks in the air after hitting because it's 100% cooler, and think about positioning a bit. However, there are two main problems with this strategy. First, pulling things in the air is difficult. Also, when you have pulled them, the object goes to the direction the player was at the moment of taking it, which makes it even harder. Second, the goblins are slower than the player. That creates a sense of safety where the player has all the time in the world to pick the objects. I did several things to try to improve these problems in the gameplay. The first thing I tried was to anticipate the future position of the player. Instead of doing any hard interpolation technique, I just went and added the linear velocity to the position of the player, having a rough estimate of its future position. That was good, but it wasn't perfect. The second step I tried was to implement steering. GameDev has a series of tutorials on that. It felt a bit like cheating, but I think that a psychic should be able to have a smarter telekinesis, and the game should be a bit permissive with the player. Okay, so if the goblins are slow, let's make them faster. And that's just a variable. So the player is 18 and now the goblins will be 20. The player will feel some anxiety when he's being pursued by goblins. The idea was a no-brainer, and a further addition of a sprint here. So let's add the sprint, made it a lot cooler. So now let's bring the attention of the goblin. Yeah, there you have the sprint, and they're now faster. Now I added a particle effect, so now it's cooler to see this dash. Well, yeah, there you have it. Since the daggermen were already walking, I needed another companions that can assist them from afar, that is, archers. This is the second one of the total of 3 goblins that I will be implementing in the game, and after playing a bit with Blender, I had to implement yet another behavior for these enemies, one that coordinates with the daggermen. Of course I had to implement this animation for the bow and for the goblin itself. Okay, some optimization magic here. I'm currently implementing the AI of the goblin archer. The behavior I want to accomplish is to make the goblin flee on sight, moving to a safe distance where it can still shoot the player while the close combat goblin run head-on towards the player. And well, the problem is that I'm using A-star to decide the saltiest path to a safe position for the archer. And it freezes. Wait for it. Just a second. Okay. Yeah. So although it chooses a very wise position, it's too slow. And the reason why it's that slow is because it uses the navigation mess every time it evaluates a position to check if it's reachable, if it's a path to that position. Before trying to move into DD native or use Threading or write my own implementation of the game engine and assembly, I came up with another method that takes 3 directions that are more than 90 degrees with respect to the direction of the player, multiplies them by a constant, and using enough mesh takes the farthest distance that is reachable by the goblin. So yes, command this and use the other method. Okay, and now run it. Now when the goblin sees me, it's instantaneous. And interestingly enough, it moves to more or less the same position that the star was taking as the best solution. The player is going to face a restricted set of NPCs whom with has to interact. This inevitably leads to go and ask the internet for a dialog system in Godot, because there's no way I'm implementing a whole dialog system. Hence, let's just take a step back and honor the existence of the smart Godot plugin, because not only it provides a cool UI that you can tweak with some parameters, but also an editor on the dialog system. So here you can go and change different chapters that I used for setting the different quests, different dialogues, and different messages. This sets a very interesting workflow to work with a whole project. Since the hand needed someone to interact with that's not a goblin, I made this model of a witch in Blender, which is not very good and I will need to improve, but it makes more or less for a placeholder. And I also implemented some animation that I'm not using for anything. It's working. And you can make it talk. Oh yeah, I'm using the talk loop for something. Another good thing is that all the functionalities integrated in a script, in GameDev that I could tweak to make it to my liking. Also to accept different pull and push to interact with it. Now I can interact with the witch just by pushing. And you can see that by pushing I'm moving forward in the dialogue. So it accepts an arrow, and now it's setting this coin stuff here. Say thank you for your arrow, and now it moves to another quest. At this point I decided to upload the project to itch.io, where you can play an early prototype and give me some feedback about this main mechanic. It is not available to play on the browser, but you can play if you want on Linux, Mac and Windows. I will leave the link in the description down below. To wrap up these 2 weeks, I finally wrote an early implementation of the inventory, which provides, for now, the sole feature of a money system. You can see here that after giving the witch, but well, okay, let me try again. Yeah, so you pick the arrow, you give it to the witch, and now After talking to her, we received 20 units of some imaginary monetary system that I haven't thought of yet, but that puts me into a position where I can already think of implementing a quest system with money and a real inventory with some quest items to work on a final product. And that was all for this devlog. I think I implemented and tried a lot of different things that puts the games in the right direction. For the next months, I will be implementing an MVP that I will release for free, so that with some lag I get some feedback and some playtesters that allows me to implement the whole final product. Thank you for watching.